Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about Ceres in the third house in a natal chart. Now, Ceres in astrology can be connected with how one may nurture and care, and also associated with how one may desire to be nurtured and cared for. Now, given that this is we're talking about the third house, it might be a person that actually, we're talking about the houses, so it's more about the where and the what, and this could be a person that might uh, nurture their siblings very strongly. They may nurture communications, care for their cousins. Say if this is in the zodiac sign Cancer, it could be very sympathetic, nurturing energy, of course, and Pisces could have a lot of compassion blended in with it. Now, it could be also a person that might care for their neighbors, with really very strongly, and also for their local transportation. It might be a person that really cares more about like their vehicles, like say a car or a van or what have you, more so than the average person as far as the maintenance and the upkeep of it. Now, it also could be a person that really cares, shows they're carrying energy through short journeys. It could be taking somebody to a local store and through local transportation, and also a person that might strongly care for people that were prominent in their early education. And if this, again, going back to the zodiac sign Cancer, say if this is in Cancer as an example, it could be done with a lot of dedication and devotion. Now, Ceres in astrology can also be associated with dissipated or depleted self-worth or self-esteem. Now, given that this is the third house, maybe in some cases it could be attributed to a lack of eloquence. And of course, a lot of this could be predicated and dependent on aspects in the chart. If your Mercury is strongly afflicted, as an example, that could be something that could really reinforce and reaffirm that energy. But a lot of cases, it could just be somebody that just maybe doesn't think that they have good communication skills, whether they have them or not. It could be over issues with siblings, neighbors, or cousins as well. And say if this is an Aries as an example, that could be attributed to maybe very contentious or acrimonious situations with them, or even an adverse aspect to their natal Mars, or even a conjunction to their natal Mars. Now, it could also be through issues connected with local transportation. Perhaps some cases this person may be more dependent on others for their local transportation than average, or may have to depend on public transportation more so than the average person. And maybe this is connected with maybe the person not feeling really that good about themselves. Also, too, Ceres in astrology can be associated with eating issues and disorders that are associated with food and eating. Now, given that we're talking about the third house, could this be something that might be tied into the rational mind a little more? Perhaps maybe it impacts their communications more so than the average person. It might be some issues where maybe the siblings or neighbors are somehow more involved in this situation than average, and cousins perhaps as well. It might even really strongly impact the person's short journeys or their mobility as well. Let's say this person has some, eating disorder, and it's real, it's something where this person is really overeating, eating excessively. Of course, moving around, your mobility is going to be hampered and hindered more so than usual. Say, for example, if you have this in the zodiac sign Capricorn, it might cause some, certain despondent thinking and affect your rational mind more to some degree. But again, a lot of this, you got to always blend the sign and aspects as well. Anyway. Well, Ceres in astrology can also be associated with raising children. Now, if you are a parent and raising children, this could be one where you encourage your child toward rational thinking and communications, being able to hold a good conversation, and maybe just having understanding maybe about a lot or a plethora of subjects. Say if this is in the zodiac sign Aquarius, it could be where you encourage your children perhaps to really think outside the box and thinking futuristically, and try to be innovative in their thought process, and talk about perhaps a lot of different ideas that could be tied into one's future. Since we're talking about the third house does correspond with the zodiac sign Gemini, and that could be connected with variety. So anyway, now it could also be where, as far as raising children goes, you might be more inclined in some cases to involve your neighbors, maybe people that were prominent in your early education. And also, it might be encouraging them to assimilate knowledge, to be able to be learned and to be able to speak in a very, speak in an articulate manner and be eloquent in their thought and in their terms of how they speak. So anyway, now, Ceres in astrology can also, sadly, be associated with taking, forcibly against one's will, being coerced against one's will to go somewhere. And in other words, it can be associated with kidnappings and abductions. Now, of course, this could be very isolated, but in the isolated case it does happen and you would be involved in one, it could likely be somebody that might be in your neighborhood that you know well. Sometimes it could be a sibling or a cousin, or maybe someone that was prominent in your early childhood. It could even be, for example, maybe an adversary or an enemy you had in your early not your early child, I'm sorry, your early education. It could be somebody that that's prominent in your short journeys, your travels, local transportation. But at the same time, remember, given that this is the third house of communication, this could be something that you might actually be able to communicate about very well. And the other things that I mentioned as well, as far as nurturing and caring and talking about maybe dissipated self-worth and self-esteem, those kind of things, serious issues, you might be very voluble, to say the least, and be very loquacious, speak loquaciously about those issues, so to speak, and speaking extensively about Ceres related matters. Now, Ceres in astrology can also be associated with family connections. Now, given that this is the third house, this could be one that may be very communicative. It might involve a lot of short journeys, situations with local transportations. Maybe you have some. Third house is the house of Gemini, and it can be dexterity as well. It could be where you might be tied into a family that might be very dexterous, have good use of the hands. It could be a family that's very mechanically inclined, be able to do work on cars, for example. It can also be where your family may be more tight. You might have a closer connection, perhaps with siblings, with neighbors, siblings and your cousins, as well as far as family members, because the third house does correspond with siblings and cousins and neighbors as well. Maybe it could be where you might consider them part of your family, simulated family, or the neighbors might figure strongly, more so than most, in your family activities, more so than most. But anyway, Ceres in astrology can also be associated with dejection, sorrow, and disappointment. Now, in some cases, could this be tied into something connected with communication? It could be something that's literary. It could even be something connected with your early education, such as losing a spelling bee that you might, let's say if this is in the zodiac sign Cancer again, it could be something that you could be brooding or lamenting about for some protracted period. It could be some issues connected with short travels, or not making maybe an appointment somewhere, or appointments that are connected with local transportation that are in your neighborhood, or maybe having certain limitations and restrictions in doing so, such as maybe not having a vehicle and being overly dependent again on public transportation. There could even be connections with mobility issues in some isolated cases. Maybe it could just be simply having more difficulty moving around, more so than most people. Say if this is in Aquarius, maybe in some cases it could be something connected with the ankles or the shins that are causing some issues that are that are causing mobility issues or some unusual circumstances. Ceres in astrology can also be associated with protection, protective energy. Now, you might be somebody that might be more protective of siblings, more so than usual. Your thoughts, maybe what you actually say to others. You might be one of those people that wants to keep a lot of things very confidential, very secretive. Say if you have this in Scorpio, especially, you might be a person that might be very guarded regarding what you want to say. And I mean, say if you have Mercury retrograde, you might even be more held back in terms of what you want to say, more so than the average person. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, I'm back. But anyway, could also be where you're very protective in terms of your short journeys you're driving. You might be somebody that's equipped with things like for your car and for protection, and whether it's securing your vehicle. I don't know if that club is still available that locks into the steering wheel, or some kind of, maybe advanced alarm system you might have in your car, or maybe even in your short journeys when you're just walking places. You might be somebody that might be, have like your pepper spray or whatever it is that you're legally required to carry. I mean, say if this is like an Aries, or if it conjuncts Mars, it could be somebody that might be very protective in their short journeys and carry like some kind of weaponry that's legal. I'm hoping but anyway, that's another thing is that this is also about, I mean, it could be issues, I mean, and also a person that is just like protective of their own rational thinking, and making sure that they are able to handle things in very, rational manner, as opposed to becoming irascible and letting their anger or emotions impact their logical thinking. I mean, if somebody's got Mercury in a water sign, of course that would impact things significantly. And or if if your Mercury makes an adverse aspect to your moon, is another example, it might be a little harder to have, to stay rational in thought, though. So anyway, well, Ceres in astrology can also be associated with clothing. Now, this could be a person that goes to like yard sales in their neighborhood, or goes to neighborhood sales, goes to a local thrift shop. It could be through short trips, through local transportation. It might be, people might also be interested in a variety of clothing, since we're talking about the third house of Gemini. Say if this is in Leo as an example, it might be a lot of clothing that's very flamboyant, that stands out, but you might be spending extravagantly on it as well. And it might be something where as far as your siblings, your cousins, your neighbors go, they might be more involved in the clothes you wear one way or another, or whether you're actually giving clothes to them, or selling it to them, or maybe you're receiving clothes from them, or making exchanges with them as far as your clothing goes. So anyway, well, Ceres in astrology can also be associated with what one may obliterate in order to restore what one may have previously had. Given that this is the third house, it could be in just some cases simply eradicating or eliminating some communications, perhaps to restore maybe a connection with their siblings, their cousins, their neighbors, things they may do in their neighborhood. That could be some examples, or maybe in some isolated cases it could be eliminating some connection with the sibling or a cousin or a neighbor in order to restore some kind of communications, or be more involved in things they have to do in terms of their short journeys, their local transportation, or or anything that could be third house related. And so those are or maybe just to even think rationally again, because sometimes, say, even family connections, of course, could drive one figuratively crazy. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, people, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.